The camera opens on chaos. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead, washing the room in a harsh white glow. Gurney wheels screech against the tile floor as nurses shove equipment into place. The air tastes like antiseptic and panic. Someone get Dr. Rios. Now. Nurse Valerie's voice slices through the noise. On the stretcher lies Evelyn Hart, 67. Gray hair is flattened against the pillow, her hands trembling against her chest. Her lips are swollen, not bruised, but overinflated. As if something inside is pushing to escape, her voice is hoarse and desperate. It started as a tiny pimple. Her breath shakes, the world around her blurs. Machines beep in uneven rhythms. A surgical lamp snaps on overhead, blasting her face with light. Dr. Samuel Rios rushes in, gloves already half on. Talk to me, Evelyn. How long has this been growing? Evelyn tries to answer, but her lips tremble uncontrollably. She fights for breath. It was just on my lip. I tried to pop it and then. Her voice breaks. Something under the skin shifts. Not blood, not fluid, a deliberate movement. Dr. Rios freezes, his eyes wide, not with confusion, but with something far worse. Recognition. He signals without looking away from her. Scalpel. Suction. Prepare for extraction. Nurse Valerie leans in, staring at Evelyn's lip like she's witnessing the impossible. Doctor. It's still moving. The heart monitor spikes. Evelyn whispers, her voice trembling. Please tell me what's inside me. Dr. Rios doesn't answer. He lowers the scalpel. It all began with a pimple, before the hospital lights and screaming alarms. Life was quiet. Evelyn Hart, 67, moved through her small cottage like time flowed slower there. The morning sun filtered through lace curtains, painting soft patterns on her wooden kitchen table. A kettle hissed gently on the stove. She hummed an old song from the 70s as she placed tea leaves into her favorite porcelain cup. The one with a faded bluebird on it. She'd had it since her wedding. Her house smelled like lavender and old books, because Evelyn loved books, not just reading them. She lived inside them. Stacks of novels lined the walls. A framed photo on the shelf showed Evelyn years ago, standing in front of a library, holding a plaque. Head librarian. 37 years of service. Now, she filled her days with delicate routines. Tea first, crossword puzzle second, feeding the birds third. She walked outside with a small jar of seeds. The cold morning air brushed her cheeks. Birds fluttered down as soon as she stepped onto the porch. Good morning, babies, she whispered, sprinkling seeds along the railing. Don't fight over it. There's plenty. She talked to the birds because she lived alone. Her husband passed away 5 years ago. Her daughter lived 2 states away. Evelyn rarely complained. Being alone wasn't loneliness. Most days. She sat at the mirror in her bedroom, brushing her silver hair into a loose bun. She stared at her reflection for a moment, the soft wrinkles, the kindness still in her eyes. 67, she whispered with a gentle laugh. And still here. She leaned closer to apply lip balm. That's when she noticed it. A tiny bump right on her upper lip, barely visible, nothing concerning. She squinted. Just a pimple. She shrugged. She pressed her finger against it lightly and smiled. No pain, no worry, not yet. 3 days later, the bump was no longer tiny. Evelyn stood again in front of her bedroom mirror, this time squinting harder. The lighting wasn't helping, so she leaned so close her breath fogged the glass. The bump on her upper lip had grown, not dramatically, but enough that it caught the light differently, like a small shadow beneath her skin. She pressed it gently. A faint, sharp sensation shot inward, not outward like a normal pimple. It felt deep, rooted. Her brows pulled together. Strange. She lowered the mirror and glanced around at the quiet house. The ticking wall clock sounded louder than usual. She dabbed a little lip balm on it and forced a smile. It'll go away. Later that afternoon, she walked to the local farmer's market. The crisp air smelled like apples and cinnamon. She bought a loaf of sourdough and chatted with the vendor, Mr. Henderson. As she spoke, she felt a subtle, persistent tingle on her lip. She unconsciously touched it with her tongue, feeling the firm, foreign lump. For a fleeting second, she thought of the bird feeder she'd refilled that morning, the rough, untreated wood. She'd gotten a tiny splinter on her finger weeks ago. Could a speck of something have flown up and embedded itself in her lip? The thought was absurd. She dismissed it. It was just a pimple. It had to be. But that night, as she sipped her tea, the tingle returned, stronger. It was no longer just a bump. It was a presence, and it was beginning to make itself known. She met her old friend Helen, 70, a lively widow who always wore too much perfume and too many bracelets that jingled with every movement. "Oh my goodness," Helen gasped, leaning closer, her perfume enveloping Evelyn. "Did you get stung by something?" Evelyn pulled back slightly. No, just a little pimple." Helen's eyes narrowed, her playful demeanor replaced by genuine concern. "Honey, pimples don't look like that." Evelyn laughed it off, waving a dismissive hand. But a flutter of unease rippled through her chest. When she returned home that evening, she washed her face and leaned close to the mirror again, intending to check the bump. Instead, she froze. The skin near the bump twitched. Just once, small, almost imperceptible. But it moved. Evelyn's breath caught. That had to be my imagination. Had to be. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open and her glasses sliding halfway down her nose. She typed slowly, "How to get rid of pimple on lip at home." A list of cheerful articles popped up. Warm compress, tea tree oil, don't stress. She nodded to herself as if the internet had spoken absolute truth. See, nothing serious. She heated a small towel in warm water and pressed it against her lip. Steam rose, and for a moment, it felt soothing. She hummed while scrolling to a recipe for homemade remedies. Next, she dipped a cotton swab in tea tree oil and dabbed it lightly. Ouch! A sharp, electric sting shot through her lip. She forced a smile. "It means it's working." The next day, she applied honey, then aloe vera, then an ice cube wrapped in a napkin. Nothing helped. The bump was getting bigger, rounder, more defined. Every time she looked in the mirror, that tiny pulse beneath her skin mocked her. "I'm still here." But Evelyn refused to let fear win. She covered the swelling with a surgical mask and went to the grocery store. Nobody had to know. Nobody had to notice. At checkout, the young cashier glanced at her mask. Cold season. Evelyn forced a cheerful laugh. Something like that. She drove home with groceries in the back seat and denial riding shotgun. Inside the silence of her cottage, she whispered to herself, "It's just a pimple. It's just a pimple." But somewhere deep inside, she knew she was lying. Evelyn sat in the waiting room at Ridgeway Clinic. Hands folded tightly in her lap, the place smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. A young nurse called her name without even looking up from her clipboard. Evelyn Hart. Evelyn stood, clutching her purse as if it were armor. Inside the exam room, she sat on the paper-covered table. The thin crinkle of the sheet punctuated the silence as the door swung open and Dr. Lucas Breener, mid-40s, breezed in. He didn't greet her. He didn't look at her. He just stared at his tablet. "Okay," he mumbled. "What brings you in?" Evelyn lifted her mask slowly. The doctor sighed. "It's just a pimple." "No," she said quietly, her voice firmer than she felt. "It's growing." Dr. Breener finally glanced up. He leaned closer, examining it for less than 2 seconds. "It's a clogged pore, very common in older skin, but it feels like something's inside." Her voice shook. He laughed under his breath, a dry, dismissive sound. "Everything feels dramatic at your age." His words hit harder than anything physical could. Evelyn blinked slowly, trying to maintain her dignity. "I just want to make sure." Dr. Breener typed something into the tablet. "I'll prescribe an antibiotic cream. Apply it twice a day. If you start hallucinating that it's talking to you, then come back." Evelyn's face fell. He wasn't listening. He wasn't even trying. "Doctor," she whispered, her last shred of hope crumbling. It moved. Dr. Breener paused, then smirked. "Muscle twitch. It happens. Use the cream, don't Google things." He stood and reached for the door handle. "If we treated everyone who panicked over a blemish, we'd never get anything done." He walked out. The door clicked shut. Evelyn sat there, small and silent, staring at the spot where his hand had touched the doorknob. She felt stupid, dismissed, invisible. The prescription slip in her hand felt like a verdict of her own insignificance. She had been brave enough to ask for help, and the system had told her she was nothing more than a hysterical old woman. She folded the prescription and tucked it into her purse, the paper feeling as useless as she did. The drive home was silent, the hum of the engine a dull accompaniment to the thrum of fear and shame now pulsing beneath her skin, right where the thing continued to grow. Outside the clinic, she passed the receptionist who didn't look up. Evelyn stepped into the cold, sharp air. The wind brushed her swollen lip. And for the first time, a cold, hard fear outweighed all denial. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned beneath her quilt. The room was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock and her own anxious breathing. Every pulse of her heartbeat made her lip throb. By 3:17 a.m., the pain became a deep, unbearable ache. She slipped into her slippers and walked to the bathroom. The soft night light cast long shadows across the tiled floor as she leaned toward the mirror. Her lip was twice the size it had been earlier, red, tight, and shiny, like something was pushing from the inside. She lifted her trembling hand and pressed lightly. A sharp, stabbing pain shot through her face. She recoiled, her eyes widening in horror. The bump didn't just pulse, it wriggled, a distinct, squirming movement underneath the skin. "No," she whispered, her breath shaking. "No, that's impossible." She backed away from the mirror, gripping the edge of the sink. Her knees nearly buckled. Tears welled in her eyes. "This has to be an infection," she said to herself, trying to cling to reason. The doctor said it was nothing. She turned off the bathroom light and paced the hallway, hugging herself. Her breaths came fast and uneven. She felt like she was losing control of her own body. She grabbed her phone and opened the camera to look again, hoping the lighting was playing tricks on her. The camera flipped to selfie mode. What she saw made her drop the phone. Under the skin, something moved sideways. Not a pulse, but a deliberate, traveling motion. She stumbled backward, her chest heaving, vision blurring with panic. She scrambled to pick up the phone, but her hands were shaking too badly. The next morning, she woke up on the couch, still in her robe, eyelids heavy from exhaustion. The swelling was worse, now extending slightly toward her cheek. She touched the side of her face. The movement happened again, slow, deliberate, like a creature turning in its sleep. "I need help," Evelyn whispered to the empty room, but she already knew no one would believe her. Not again. She put on a mask, grabbed her car keys, and headed toward the emergency room. This time, denial was gone. Only raw, unadulterated fear remained. The automatic doors of the emergency room slid open with a hiss. Evelyn stepped inside, clutching her purse against her body like a lifeline. Her mask hid the swelling, but her eyes betrayed everything: fear, exhaustion, desperation. She approached the check-in counter. "I need to see a doctor, please," she whispered. The receptionist didn't look up from her computer. "Have a seat. A nurse will call you." Evelyn swallowed. "I think it's getting worse. That's what the waiting room is for." She walked to a plastic chair and sat alone, surrounded by coughing strangers, flickering TV screens, and the sterile smell of disinfectant. She stared at the floor tiles, counting each breath just to stay grounded. Helen would have been here if she had told her, but Evelyn didn't want to worry anyone. She had spent her whole life being strong for others, as a wife, as a mother, as a librarian. Now, when she needed someone most, she felt utterly invisible. Her phone buzzed with a message from her daughter. "Sorry, Mom, busy week. We'll call you Sunday." Evelyn stared at the screen. Sunday felt centuries away. Her eyes blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She blinked rapidly, trying to steady her breathing. But the pressure inside her lip pulsed harder, as if whatever was beneath the skin was feeding on her stress. Finally, after nearly 2 agonizing hours, her name was called. Inside the small exam room, a nurse glanced at her chart. "Evelyn Hart, what seems to be the problem today?" With a trembling hand, Evelyn slowly lowered her mask. The nurse's professional smile vanished. Her eyes locked onto Evelyn's lip, which was now a grotesque, swollen mass distorting the lower half of her face. The skin was stretched taut and shone under the fluorescent lights. A faint, dark spot was visible at the center. "My God," the nurse breathed, her pen hovering over the clipboard. "How long has it been like this?" Before Evelyn could answer, the skin around the dark spot twitched violently. Both women stared, frozen. The nurse took a sharp step back, her hand flying to the call button on the wall. Her voice was no longer routine. It was urgent, laced with alarm. "I need a doctor in here, right now." After being neglected and forgotten in an exam room, a desperate Evelyn attempts to lance the swelling on her lip herself with a sterile needle. She is stopped just in time by Dr. Rios, during a careful medical procedure. Dr. Rios and a nurse discover and extract a live, worm-like parasitic larvae from beneath Evelyn's skin. confirming her worst fears. The narrative concludes with Dr. Rios explaining the diagnosis. She had a rare parasitic infection, likely from contaminated water. The story ends on this shocking revelation, resolving the medical mystery but leaving the emotional and physical aftermath to be addressed. The summary highlights themes of medical neglect, patient desperation, and the horror of a parasitic infestation. After the parasitic larvae is removed, she is left with a physical scar but a profound sense of validation. The experience transforms her from a victim into a resilient survivor. She stops hiding and begins using her experience to help others by joining online support groups for patients who have been dismissed by doctors. The narrative ends on a powerful note of empowerment, showing how her trauma has been transformed into a source of strength and advocacy. The central theme is that the true horror was not the physical parasite, but the feeling of not being believed, and that surviving it unlocked a deeper personal strength. That's all about our stories. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the story? Please share it in the comments below.